Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader back with you tonight, Jersey First TV. We are bringing you important issues that support New Jersey families and that really dig into things that we need to be thinking about as a society. And tonight is no different. It's going to be a little bit of a difficult episode, but incredibly important. And I hope that you stick with us and listen to the story we're about to bring you. I want to welcome my friend, an incredible woman, Heather Glogolich. Welcome to Jersey First TV.
Thank you so much.
Heather, I've talked to you before. I know your story, and I thought, you know what? Our audience needs to hear from you. You've got an incredible story to tell and advocacy that you have for victims of domestic violence. And I want everyone to know, by the way, no small thing, you happen to also be a lieutenant in the police force in Morris County, and actually in my town, which I love because that makes me feel that much safer. But you're an intelligent woman committed to what you do. You to experience domestic violence and also to be a lieutenant, to be a policewoman, to see this firsthand with other people is incredible. So Heather, I don't want to wait. Let's get into the story. It's going to be tough. And I do want people to know this may be triggering for some people, but it's important to hear what Heather went through so we can begin then to transition to talking about helping other people. And we're going to bring on somebody very special at the end of this to talk about that. So Heather, bring us back to what happened to you a few years ago and start to tell us this story.
So I've been a police officer for 17 years, and I met my ex-husband in the police academy. So he was also in law enforcement, and it was a whirlwind relationship. We ended up having 2 kids from our marriage. And it ended October 16th, 2008. When he came home from work, he was extremely intoxicated and he proceeded to beat me up for 4 hours in our home while my kids slept in the next room. It was a little bit more than that. You know, it was degrading. He headbutted me and strangled me till I lost consciousness and tried to make me kill myself, saying the whole time that he knew that he was going to go to jail and he couldn't go to jail. And if he was going to go down, then I needed to go down also. He whipped me in the legs so people wouldn't see the marks and said that if I woke up our kids, that he would kill all of us. It was just 4 hours of just being berated and beaten. And it ended with him taking his gun out of his waistband. And he ordered me to the ground and he put a pillow over my head and he loaded the gun. And as he was loading the gun, he pushed the barrel of the gun against my head. And then all of a sudden, nothing happened. As he started to pull the trigger, he just stopped. And he started crying and then collapsed on the ground, passed out from being drunk. And I just laid there. And I knew at that point that if I did not get out at this point, that I was going to die. This was not the first time that he had been physical with me, but there weren't many times, right? I think when people think about victims of domestic violence, they assume that they are these broken, weak women for the most part, which isn't true.
Yeah.
That they're just the people that are going to be beaten over and over and like they, burn food and they get hit or something like that. That wasn't my situation. And yes, that does happen to women and men out there. That wasn't my situation. A lot of my abuse came from controlling of my money, of my social life. I lost friends. I was taken away from family. I was moved very far away, which I look back now and I know that that's a warning sign and a red flag. He would check my cell phone. He has a drinking problem. He's an alcoholic. I don't know if he's sober now. I hope so. Yeah. But, he was always great to me when I was pregnant. So again, we weren't married very long and I was pregnant for 18 months of that time. And I think he looked at me as a walking trophy, a walking symbol of being taken. So that didn't make him feel insecure. And again, I feel a lot of abuse comes from insecurity on the part of the actor. I don't think it has anything to do with the victim at all, nor should it. Doesn't matter what a victim does. Yeah. Thing should warrant being beaten or made to feel like less than you are. So laying on that ground, I knew I had to come up with a plan and I had the resources to do it. However, everybody always says, you're a police officer. You're this strong woman. You have this personality that just seems like you will do anything you need to. Right. And the entire time I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. There was this embarrassment factor of me being that image to other people. How am I going to tell the guys I work with that I am weak-minded and weak physically and couldn't take care of myself in my own personal life and expect them to believe that I could take care of others and take care of them if I needed to on the job? So there was a lot that had held me back for a really long time. And there was a lot that really held me back that day from calling 911. I called more times than I can remember, hung up. And even
Mhm.
when I got in touch with the 911 dispatcher, I downplayed it because I was scared, because I didn't know what I was going to do or how far I wanted to take it or whether or not I could get out on my own without needing help. And my ex-husband left. I sent him to the store when we all woke up. And I was like, I need you to get a bunch of things. I put a bunch of things on the list I knew he wouldn't be able to find.
Yeah.
And when I didn't answer him when he was calling me, he started text messaging me like, I know you're trying to leave. I'm coming home. I'm leaving all the groceries here. And he had taken my car keys. So that wasn't even an option for me. And luckily I had both my kids with me, and the dispatcher legitimately, I think, saved my life today, because to this day, I don't know where they found his gun because it wasn't in the house.
Mm.
And she sent the cops to the grocery store to arrest him there or take him into custody there. And I really do believe that if they had come to the house, something else could have happened. He wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant on her part. I still have yet to get to thank her. But, the next couple years, and even to this day, I mean, almost 13 years later, it'll be 13 years on Saturday, there are still issues that I deal with from it. It's not something that you ever can forget about, right? It
Yeah.
changes you as a person. There are
Yeah.
things in our lives that will constantly change us. I mean, things like just COVID has changed everybody as a person and how they react. But this just stays with me. And on a level where I feel like, how do I let what I went through not serve a purpose?
Right.
And it wasn't
Right.
easy to come forward. I had to wait for a lot of things to go through. I had to get done with the criminal charges and the restraining orders, and I had to go through a divorce, and I still have to share custody of my children.
Yeah.
And it's all ways that you continue to be re-victimized, which is why I can see why victims don't have the strength to leave, because it's just
Mhm.
easier to take a beating sometimes than to deal
Yeah.
with the aftermath of it all.
So
And
let me ask you something, Heather, because one of the things about this, I think, is the buildup to it. Because you make some interesting points about, what he had done before and not done before, and you being also a police officer and walking into these situations. Now that you look back, what pattern do you see? How do you say to a woman that maybe right now she's just being emotionally abused? Maybe it hasn't turned into physical yet, but it's still abuse. What do you see going back now, and when you see other people, because you have to go to homes, you get those calls, you walk in, you're on the other side of it. So there's some women that maybe, or even men listening right now, that are saying this is escalating. So looking back on it, what do you learn from that period before the really extreme physical abuse happened that evening?
to put myself in the mind of a victim is to know that they always want to believe it's never going to happen again. Right? Nobody wants to go through that. So when they're going through it and it's done, they're like, you know what? Maybe he really does. And I apologize for saying he, but
Yeah, that's your experience.
astronomically, as far as numbers and reporting, women come forward as abuse victims, sexual assault victims. And I'm very aware that men are abused. I think a lot more men don't come forward because they think that they have to hold on to that
Yeah.
machismo of not being a victim.
Yeah.
But I think that hindsight is 2020, and most people can be manipulated to believe that those red flags are not red flags,
Mm.
that they are someone caring about you, right? I check your phone and I want to know where you are because I want to make sure that you're safe, right? Well, you're not my father. Right?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
is kind of the balance for me, right? And I try
Right.
to teach my kids that, because I think as a parent, we do have to control where they go and understand where they are, especially up to a certain age. And I try to always say, like, the difference here is that I'm your parent and I'm
Mm.
legally responsible for you. And when you're an adult, you're responsible for yourself. And while it's really nice for someone to care about you, you should be able to take care of yourself. It's
Right.
it's I tell my husband all the time, I don't need you, but I do want you to be the person that
Mm.
takes care of me. And I think that's the balance. But when they start to check your phone, you know, I'm a big advocate of not sharing bank accounts, just because I went through financial abuse as well. I like to be able to have my own money. Somebody can't see where I'm going, what I'm doing. Not that I have anything to hide, but again, it's just another way of manipulation that even if you're not
Mm.
doing something wrong, an abuser will use that as a tool to make you feel bad about yourself, to
Right.
make you feel like you're less of a person,
Right.
to take money from you so you don't have the ability to get out if you want to. And, you know, there were things like I'd be on the road and I'd be on a really bad crash. And of course, I wouldn't have my phone on me because I'd be tending to victims of a crash. And he'd be like, "Why did you take so long to call me back? You were probably with your partner." And blah, blah. I'm like, it was just constant exhaustion of having
Yeah.
to explain what I
Yeah.
was doing. even though everything I was doing was on the up and up.
Yeah.
So it's all those little things. And when I look back now, when I look at the fact that he never liked my friends, he didn't want me to play softball anymore. He told me I didn't need to go back to college because I already have a job. Why I go back and finish my degree? There were all these little things that when you put them together and you look back, you
Mhm.
absolutely can see a clear picture of abuse leading up to him being physically controlling. And when somebody is physically controlling of you, it has nothing to do with them necessarily wanting to control you as a person. It's because they can't control who they are as a person.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
it
That's
really comes down to them. And that is the biggest thing that I talk to victims about because they're always self-blaming. They're always like, how could I let this happen? Or maybe I deserved it. And when it comes down to it, it truly is about the person who is physically or emotionally or sexually abusing you. It's their lack of control. It's their low self-esteem. It's their
right.
inability to believe that they can be better and actually be disciplined to be better.
Well, you're what you're illustrating there is transferring the blame, if you will, away from the victim to where it belongs. And the
Yeah.
victims tend to say, I've done something, I've triggered him or her. And talking about all the triggers up to it or red flags that you have seen, things that have happened. And we're gonna bring on a friend of yours when we're done telling your story that is really going to address this issue about victims tracking these things that happen to them. Heather, when you finally called in, obviously this was an extreme situation. You'd been abused for 4 hours physically. You thought you were going to die. It was an extreme evening, right? So
Yeah.
when you call in, though, you'd never called in before, had you? Had you ever called in on him? And what happens to victims when they call the first time? Don't they feel and don't they get asked, well, you've never called before,
Yeah.
what's this history? Did this just come out of the blue? Address that issue.
Yeah. And that's a huge issue. And again, that's a lot of the pushback that I received when I came forward, which I think is extremely unfair. You know, victims of domestic violence, their power is taken away from them.
Mhm.
And they're empowering themselves in a very small way when they come forward. And to not be believed, and I don't mean on a personal level, but on a law level, right? So when victims come forward and they report things, the only time that anything that they say can be admissible as far as a past incident that was unreported is when they're filing for a restraining order. And then when they are trying to go for their final restraining order, it can be used if there's a trial for that. When charges are there, you can't unless you have proof. And again, when it comes to proof, it's how do we prove this is real? Was it fabricated? Did he or
Yeah.
she walk into a wall? Did he or she get that doing something else? Like, how do we know that this person perpetuated this crime against this person? And I don't want to take away too much thunder from Sheri, but she has created an app that allows the legal system to be able to utilize past incidents that went unreported to law enforcement to be used as evidence for future charges.
Yeah.
It's incredible because,
Yeah.
again, the ability to be able to talk about what happened to you before is not easy, right? When
Yeah.
victims come forward and they finally get the ability and the courage to ask for help, right then and there, all they want is to be safe. That is
Right.
it. Right then and there. They do not want to talk about all the other stuff because, again, then we're going back through it, right? Again and again. We want you to just address this. We want this one time to be enough. We want to be safe. And that's it. And to go back over all the things that have happened to a victim of domestic violence is like making them relive it and feel it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do all over again because your mind and your heart has tried to transition forward and has tried
Yeah.
to forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think our job as law enforcement officers is to be open to that and be sensitive to that and utilize resources that are trained to be able to talk to people in a way
Yeah.
where they feel more comfortable to do that. I take great pride in the fact that I work for a department that really is extremely sensitive to the nature of
Right.
how victims feel on a level that supersedes almost anybody else I've ever met. The guys I work with are incredible.
Well, it's and as are you, and obviously you're using something very difficult that happened to you and serving the community in a way that is incredibly beneficial. I have to ask you, based on the past 18 months and the shutdowns and COVID, and we read that domestic violence has increased. We read that drug abuse has increased. Alcoholism is on the rise. We obviously understand as people that humanity is hurting. So I want to know from your standpoint and your experience being on the front lines during all of this, do you agree with that? Has it gotten worse?
So here's the problem with being able to accurately answer that in a way that really mimics what's going on. people are stuck in a home with an abuser, they can't call for help. So how do we
Yeah.
really know
Good
whether it's
point.
worse or whether it's better? Also, you don't know the mind of an abuser. If somebody's not leaving the house and they don't have that insecurity about them not being there and not being theirs, maybe they are nicer, right? So it's really hard for me to give you a number or anything like that. One, domestic violence is something that is protected as far as the victim is concerned,
Right.
but I can report numbers from JBWS, which is Morris County's Center for Assisting Victims of Domestic Violence. They're a resource that we use for victims. They believe that while we used to have more numbers reported of domestic violence, the numbers of more serious offenses are a lot higher during the last 18 months. And that comes directly from them. So we're not getting called for harassments and criminal mischief like we used to. We're getting calls for he or she almost killed me, or I was sexually assaulted, or it's physical abuse. It's really loud. It's really bad. Other people are calling. So again, it's really hard to give you an accurate answer. It's like talking about sexual assault. You have to have people that are willing to come forward so you actually know what's going on. And when you're stuck in an environment, I mean, the number of child abuse cases are down because of the fact that kids aren't in school and teachers aren't seeing it and therapists and things like that. So again, that's where we're at as far as an actual answer. I don't have one.
But your gut tells you what you just described it well, and I get that, right? We don't know the numbers, but we know something isn't right. And I think what we're speaking to, again, based on your experience, you got to the point where that abuse that evening was so extreme, you almost died. You thought you were going to die. And I've talked to you before. You've detailed it out for I think we talked for an hour once, and you gave such great detail. But when you look at that being sort of the crescendo of a lot of things, I want you to speak to the woman or man who right now is saying, you know what, I can relate to some of this, or something's going on that's not right. Maybe they haven't been to that extreme moment yet, and God forbid, hopefully they don't get there. But if you were to speak to yourself years before that, what advice would you give? What do you do if you think something is going sideways, something isn't right, the red flags are there? What do you do, Heather?
I think it really comes down to a personal level, right? Because there are people that tried to tell me that my relationship was not great. There are people that tried to step in. My father, walking down the aisle right before, said, "Are you sure you really want to do this?" And I thought he was kidding because he's like, "Hey, I'm daddy's little girl. I'm his princess. He doesn't want me to go anywhere." But again, when you get out of a domestic violence incident, it is a personal and empowering thing to do. I can't give advice to anybody who wants to, other than the fact that I will always be there for somebody. And I know there are so many people that are. I think it really comes down to self-worth and self-growth, and just continuing to not believe the negative about yourself and to pull out all the positive that you can think of about yourself, the things that make you happy, and realizing that love shouldn't hurt, that love is about respect. And wouldn't it be funny if just the entire world felt that way on every single level? How great we would be with every single issue we deal with, that people just respected one another and appreciated a difference of opinions and understood that there's ways to communicate without yelling or putting people down. And to realize the best advice I've ever been able to give somebody who actually took it to leave, and not because they actually wanted to, for themselves, was, if you have children, and most people in serious domestic violence that I've come in contact with have a child in common with that other person, which is why they don't leave. One of the reasons, would you want your son or daughter to either act like that or be treated like that? And if the answer is no, then that should be more of an inspiration to leave than to stay and deal with what you're dealing with. I hear so many times parents say, "Oh, my kids don't even know what's going on." They absolutely do know what's going on. Kids see the truth in people faster than any of us can. They have less bias. They have less experience in life. They have less things that are clouding their judgment and changing their mind about how they feel, because they haven't been taught to feel a different way, that they can see a slight change in the way you walk, how you sit, how you move away, the body language that you have around somebody who doesn't treat you the way you deserve to be treated. And if we're preaching to our kids in school to be inclusive and to not bully and to not tolerate bullying, why are we still doing that in our home? That's where the number one lessons and where the real core relationships come from. And I credit my parents so much. I think the strength for me getting out was realizing that there is the possibility of having a wonderful marriage, because my parents have been married for, oh my gosh, I'm gonna kill me.
Long time.
More than 41 years, and like 43 or 44 years. And I think the only time they yelled at each other was when I was being a jerk as a teenager, right? I had them to lean on. I had that thing, but domestic violence breeds domestic violence.
Yeah. Yes. Very true. Very, very true. I have to tell you that I don't say this lightly. You are a hero. Your story is, while it's extreme, you turned it around. Not only did you fight for yourself and your kids to get out, and you did that, it wasn't one moment. It was many moments you had to take, many moments of courage and decision to do that. And now being able to talk about it, I'm waiting for your book because, I want to read that book.
I gotta finish
But
my PhD first, so it says doctor on it.
that's fine. You do that. But, really being able to help other people. And I think this show is so important. I know someone's listening right now who's thinking, oh my gosh, I understand, or I've been there, or I'm afraid I'm going there. And ultimately, really, Heather, this is about saving lives. And I know you do that in your day job. You really do. You're on the front lines. We love our police, and you have been on the front lines through all of this and all the nonsense focused on police as well. So you continue to be that hero. I want to bring on your friend, and I want to thank you, Heather, so much for being transparent and really sticking with this issue and telling the story, helping others. You didn't have to do that. And I want to bring on your friend, Sheri. We're going to add her in here. Sheri Kurdakul. You guys are friends as a result of all of this. And we're going to have Sheri talk about her victim's voice. Heather, how did you meet Sheri?
We were at a symposium where I was there as a law enforcement representative to talk about how law enforcement officers responded to domestic violence. And the conversation just started going. And again, it was the whole, you probably don't understand because you're this strong female. And I was like, I understand a lot more than you think. And then I heard Sheri talk, and I was like, oh my gosh, this app is brilliant. What can I do to help? I want to do anything I can to make this the best it can be, because it is going to help so many people, and it's going to change lives, and it's going to empower people to speak when they're ready, right? It affords victims the opportunity to have a voice and to hold on to that until they're ready to speak out. And so I was like, what can I do? Just sign me up.
I love it. I love that you met her and that you're involved, and we're going to give her a chance now to tell everybody about this app. I'm super excited to be able to get her to talk about it. Heather, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for allowing me to have a platform to tell it. Seriously,
Absolutely.
this is incredible. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you so much, Heather. We'll have you on again.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay, so Sheri, welcome to Jersey First TV. Sheri is the founder and CEO of this Victim's Voice app. Sheri, what an incredible thing that you have put together. I want you to back up a little bit and tell your story and how you ended up creating this.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I am also a survivor. My circumstances were a little different than Heather's. I didn't have that climactic moment. Mine started when I was a toddler. I was abused sexually, emotionally, and physically by my father, as were my sisters and my brother. I was not the one that turned my father in, but he was arrested when I was 17. And he was prosecuted. So I went through criminal court. And then growing up in that environment, like Heather said, abuse fuels abuse. And so really a train wreck of relationships after that. Failed marriage, custody battle, really ugly mess for about 29 years of my life, until I finally decided that it was time to pull myself together and figure out a different path.
Yeah.
And so I truly believe that every person that suffers trauma has some sort of addiction. And for me, it was, I'm a workaholic. I really become invested in what I do. And I worked in the tech space for a while and loved it, but it was always the enterprise tech.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, when my youngest turned 10, she built an anti-bullying mobile app for her science fair project.
Wow.
And that was the spark that brought this idea to life. And so knowing the complexities of the court, I think I know there's a real gap. Pretty much every victim and every survivor is documenting. They're documenting like crazy. They're told by everyone to document. Yeah. They're keeping journals. They're keeping binders and boxes of papers and reports. But the real disconnect is what they deem as relevant information does not match the laws that are in place.
Wow. Okay.
And when you document in a way that doesn't meet the criteria of evidence, which is a very narrow criteria, that's where the disconnect comes in. And it's very difficult to get it right. It is not easy.
Wow.
And so that was the problem that I found that we could solve. And solve it in a way that was always victim first, making sure that every business decision that we made put their privacy, their security, their safety in front of any profits at all.
Okay, so this is where the Victim's Voice app comes in.
Yes.
And when Heather first told me about this, I thought, it never really occurred to me, but you're right. They may be documenting paper and photos and I don't know what they could print and keep, but there isn't a central safe location and it doesn't align to the laws of this land, is what you're saying. It doesn't allow them to be more successful in a court situation where they need any number of things to happen to protect them. So Victim's Voice is the app. All right, walk us through the app. And by the way, Sheri, this is fabulous. This is so entrepreneuristic, but to solve something and a problem that exists from your pain, I'm sorry for everything you went through from childhood on, but again, being, it's a hero move for you to use that to help other people is tremendous. And that's why we wanted to tell this story. So talk us through the Victim's Voice app and how it works at a high level.
So there's a few really important distinctions between what we do and some of the other tools that are out there. First of all, we call ourselves an app, but we're actually a web-based application, meaning that there's never anything to download, because having an icon on your phone could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
If you download something, even if it's for free, it generates a receipt. And if your emails are being tracked, that could trigger an alert to your abuser that you're documenting. So we also understand that devices are always changing and they're always being destroyed or monitored. So we wanted to make something that was device agnostic. A user can go to a public library, log into their account and document. We don't store anything on any local device. So it's perfectly safe for them. If their devices are being monitored, then don't use your device. Use something else. Borrow a friend's. We also understand that the relevance and matching the information to the law. So it's important to us that you tell your story, because that emotional state of mind is important in the courts, but it's not everything. So we allow them to tell their story and what happened, but then we walk them through a series of guided questions that have been pre-vetted by the professionals that are going to use that information down the road in a court setting, making sure that we're collecting the right information in the right way.
Right.
We also geolocate date and timestamp every entry. Wow. So if they say they were beaten in, Trenton, New Jersey on Thursday, whatever, the app will show that that's where they were when it happened.
Wow.
We also, and here's a great example of the disconnect. We allow for images to be uploaded and we encourage a ton of pictures. We don't allow for audio or video. Because here in New Jersey, we're what's called a one-party consent state, meaning as long as one of us in the conversation is in the conversation, we can record it and it's legal. Pennsylvania, a little bit down the road, is an all-party consent state. And not only is it all-party, meaning that everyone has to give consent, but if you record without that consent, it's a felony offense.
Wow.
You will go to jail. And it doesn't matter if you're recording a crime. It matters that you didn't get consent.
Wow.
And so that's where the disconnect is. It's not fair.
But you have to take into account the different states and the different laws, and you've done the work to do that. So in a situation like New Jersey, if a victim had audio and video, it's not going to be put into this app because you have to structure it for all 50 states and the different laws. What would you advise someone do with that evidence, if you will?
Yeah. So we teach them how to transcribe. If it's, let's say it's a
Okay.
video, we teach them how to transcribe the video and upload the text
Okay.
and say, this is, this is the conversation that was had. And then they can take screenshots of the different frames in the video and upload those. And if you're in a state where it is legal, then mention where that video file is being held.
Yeah.
If it's not legal or you're not sure, don't mention it.
Don't mention it.
And
That's a lot of work, Sheri, that you guys have had to do to keep on. And these things change too. You have to stay on top of it so that in a situation where a victim now needs to go to court or is in a situation where they need to prove all of this they have been collecting. All of this information is stored within your application. And they simply then bring that up in what format? How is that delivered to the court?
Yeah. So in addition to being able to record what's important, the way it needs to be recorded, we have to certify to the courts that what's called chain of custody, meaning that the data that goes in has not been touched or tampered with in any way, shape, or form. We also are highly regulated. So there are federal regulations that say that when you release a victim or survivor's information, it has to be with their consent to a specified person for a specified reason in a reasonable amount of time. So all of that is taken care of because the user logs into their own account and assigns what we call a records recipient. And then that records recipient is able to create a light account and go in and be able to download a report and all those attached files. So all the photographs, the metadata that's attached to those photographs, all that information that they need.
Wow.
We are careful though, and we do let them know that they should be asking some questions. Like, don't assign your attorney to be the records recipient, because if your attorney gets the entire report, it's subject to defense discovery, which means that your abuser's attorney also gets a copy. And so we're just very careful, all those places where a victim can be re-victimized, to make sure that they're kept safe and their information is kept safe.
So much to think about. So they get that coaching through this. It's incredible, Sheri. I mean, it's really comprehensive. This has a small fee associated with it, but I also noticed on your website that people can donate if they can't afford it. Obviously, this is no small thing for you to put together and keep going. You have to stay on top of everything legally everywhere in all the different states. So you also have a program where if someone cannot afford it, they can apply to receive the app or the ability to use the app, I should say, for free. Is that still ongoing?
Yes. So we created what's called a partner program. And our partner program means that we partner with victim serving entities. So we've partnered with district attorneys' offices, law enforcement, victim advocate associations, nonprofits around the country. Right now, we have partners in 43 states.
Wow.
And those partners, part of their responsibility and their agreement is that they give a card, a license, which is an annual license, to anyone in their community that meets their criteria for free.
Nice.
So if someone comes in and says, I'm a victim of domestic violence, or, I need to be documenting what's going on and I don't have the means to pay $40 a year, they are obligated as part of the partner program to give them a license.
So really, no one will be said no to, for the most part. You have almost 50 of those, 43 right now in place. If you need this, you can get this. And obviously those that can afford the $40 can go ahead and do it. How can the community help you? We need to get the word out on this. Obviously, this interview is one of the ways we're going to let people know who are hurting, who need this. But how can the community in general help your organization?
So we are not a nonprofit, so we don't take donations, but our donations mean that you're donating directly to one of those nonprofits across the country that can accept the donation. And then we make sure that they get the cards and let them know that you were the donor for that card, if you choose. So they can simply go to our website, victimsvoice.app. And on the homepage, there's 3 squares, and one of them says, I can help. And they click on that. And then during the process of purchasing the cards, they can select one of the partners in our partner program, and that will automatically be sent to them.
Oh, that's amazing. All right. So give that website again, victimsvoice.app.
Yes.
Okay.
And all of our social media is Victims Voice app.
Victims Voice app. Sheri, that's incredible. I have to thank you so much. I know we just really skimmed the surface of what this can do. I hope that right now someone listening understands that this is there for them and that people are creating things to help them. Between Heather's story, your story, and the ability to bring a solution to help humanity who's going through something that difficult. Sheri, I got to give you hats off. I mean, that's what Jersey First is all about. We're about families, and people are hurting that are going through this or feeling alone. For you to develop something like that is incredible. So I thank you so much, Sheri. And for anyone listening, please go to her website if you need help. There is someone there. She's partnered with all of these nonprofits who can help you. There's no reason why you can't get access to this. Sheri, one last word to anyone listening tonight who has been in your shoes.
I would say that even when the abuse doesn't feel like abuse, if it feels off, if it feels uncomfortable, it doesn't hurt to document. Because really, legally admissible documentation really doesn't matter until it does.
Until it does. And when you think it won't, and years have gone by, you want to document it instead. You can always just leave it there. You don't have to do anything with it.
Yep.
At least you've done that so that you're not sitting there without the years of evidence. Sheri, thank you so much. And to Heather, I thank you as well. We appreciate you guys. We'll have you back on. We will definitely advocate for this and hope that our listeners go and visit your site and support you. Thank you, Sheri.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Our pleasure. And to my audience, guys, we'll see you next week. Thank you.